Hey everybody, welcome back. Here we're doing another lecture on cryptography, energy, and depth. And so what do those three things have in common? Well, we're here to find out. So I'd like to verbally give credit to these images to the internet. I got most of, this is a combination of two images I found on the internet, put them together. But yeah, anyway, so let's get to it. So there's this really fascinating link between the fields of thermodynamics and information theory. And in case you're not familiar with it, thermodynamics is the study of heat and how energy flows between things. And information theory is a study of how how information behaves in different circumstances and the kinds of transformations you can do to it and measurements you can make of it. And so this is more like computer science, and this is more physics. But this is a very fundamental part of life. I mean, you think about how much energy feeds in, like how much do you spend on food, right? And food is like you're taking in energy and you poop out like less complex things. And so it's really, this is, you can really view this as being a very central part of life. Or you think about even like geopolitics, right? I mean, where does oil live? How does that play into, who gets along with who? And likewise, so there's this kind of like this is a suggestion here that like maybe information is kind of alive or kind of behaves like life in some situations. And so this entropy idea is it's kind of abstract, but it's actually quite beautiful when you start to get a handle on it. So people are familiar with this idea of information being alive. Right, through memes, right? People make these images, they put captions on them, and somehow they kind of take on a life of their own, and people start using them for different things, and it's a very dynamic thing that there's not like I don't think there's any committee that like issues the next meme or anything. It's just people kind of make these things up and run with it. And so it has this like all these kind of characteristics of a biological process, because they replicate themselves, right? You can view that when someone else takes that same image and puts a different caption on it, that kind of relates in some way to the previous one. That's like the next generation of that meme. And so there's something going on here, and let's keep going. So this is like kind of like an association chart, and on the top you have thermodynamics. So this is like heat, energy, right? And information theory on the bottom. This is like ideas, like signals. And but these are some of the things that they're kind of associated with, right? So entropy is, when you have like a high entropy signal, it's sort of like, it's kind of meaningless, or it's very noisy. And what is noise, right? People say, like, what's the difference between noise and music?
No comment.
Yes. Right, it's sort of like how much you can pull out of it into your own mind, right? There's a kind of like signal extraction that's happening. And this is mathematically how it's described. It's the expectation of the negative log of the probability distribution of the events. So and you don't have to worry about this too much, but this is math. But this is maximized in the uniform distribution, meaning when everything looks the same as everything else. And that's important. That's just sort of like, but let's look at the thermodynamic side first. So it's associated with decay, right? I mean, there's this like second law of thermodynamics that says entropy in a closed system tends to increase, right? It can't decrease. The only way you can decrease entropy is by sort of increasing it somewhere else. So it's sort of like, how do you keep your body going? Where you have to like take other living things and absorb them into yourself. You have to sort of steal their energy, and you end up increasing their entropy. You're exporting your own entropy into your poop. And so life is all about these kind of asymmetries, where it's like we're standing here in the room, and like there's a very different kind of if you're like map the density of energy throughout the room, right? There's a lot of energy in our bodies, and it's not out around us. There's not as much. And so in thermodynamics, you roughly measure this as entropy as the total energy or the temperature. And so energy, you can kind of think of like total energy being sort of like external energy and internal energy. So you think like atoms are vibrating, but then there's also kind of like internal energy on these things. And the sum of those two things is the total energy. And so over time, that temperature is the vibration, that's the external energy. So over time, the temperature is decreasing. Right? That's the kind of like the story of like some cosmologists say, oh, the universe is going to end in heat death. Like everything's just going to freeze. It's because the temperature is going to go down because entropy is going up. And so you have this sort of like, and it's maximized, right, when the uniform distribution, right? So it's sort of like you've got, you know, if the universe ends in heat death, everything is like perfectly still. Everything everything looks like everything else because everything's sitting really still in this kind of like sort of crystalline structure. And so it's because life is movement, right? You're like moving around. You've got muscles and you've got like vibration in your body. You gotta like get up and run and so there's this kind of, but this is it's so there's a really kind of interesting deep link between these things, and yeah. So let's keep going. Any questions so far? Is this like kind of making sense?
Yeah, it really is.
Yeah.
It's actually making like, way too much sense.
That's great.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, okay. So there's this you know, important aspect of you know, energy and temperature, heat, and entropy is diffusion. Diffusion is when so this is the equation for diffusion. It's a differential equation, but basically what it means is that in a diffusive process, you tend to become more like your neighbors. So if the people or the objects, the environment around you is warmer than you, you're going to heat up. That energy is going to flow from the environment into you, because it's sort of, you know, they say nature abhors a vacuum, right? Likewise, if everything around you is colder than you, then the energy is going to flow out of you, right? And so you can see this is kind of like it starts. It's kind of bouncing back and forth, but you think if it's starting high and then evening out, right? And when it's totally flat, that's the uniform distribution. That's maximum entropy, right? So it's kind of going from this is like, oh, there's something, there's like personhood here.
Dynamic.
Quit.
Yeah.
So can we hit play on this one too? Right, so and the thing is, there's lots of diffusive processes in the world. It's not just temperature. It's also pressure does that. You know, there's like a lot of pressure in one space. It tends to, but there's also you know, you can even think of it in terms of like, I mean, you think of money as a kind of energy, like a unit of energy. And it's like, well, what happens if you don't continuously do things to like take in money? You end up spending money, right? And then it sort of travels away from you, diffuses out from you.
Kind of a huge part of the tarot too. Like,
yeah.
The Book of Thoth associates this with like the idea of the hermit. How the hermit would represent like maximum entropy.
Oh, interesting.
And then he says that that's basically death.
Wow.
Yeah, and that his hermit is supposedly death, like wearing the robe.
Well, how does that connect with? I guess when I think of the hermit, I usually think of, you know, somebody like locked away alone, studying things.
Yeah. So you think of the studying as being productive.
Yeah, I guess so. That's kind of associated, but
I think you might actually be making social commentary too, because I mean traditionally the hermit carries the staff of the patriarchs and like the cloak of invisibility and all these different tools that are like kind of magical boons. But I think like if he thinks about the staff of the patriarchs and all of these things as being artifacts of an older age, of like an age of patriarchy, things that have reached maximum entropy in the current age.
So they're like decaying, they're dying.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's an interesting way to think about it.
Yeah, and that the hermitage, like what was it in Ritual of the Romance? They say that the hermitage, like when the prince is in the hermitage, in like the Vedic mythology that I can't recall, the like land dries up and the rivers dry up and things like that.
So it's kind of like the absence of productive work from that perspective.
Yeah.
It's pretty interesting. It's also, well, you know, it's also associated with quiet, which is like kind of the uniform distribution of like sound pressure, of air pressure, And instead of like, you know, when you're alive, you're like making noise, and you're like a little kid, and you're like banging on the pots and pans. And then you're like old, and you like can't talk very loud, and you're decaying, right?
That's super cool.
Yeah, I love this thing. This is my favorite part of physics. I love this stuff. So like, well, and there's another thing. I mean, like people talk about, you know, they say you're the average of your 5 friends. Have you ever heard people say that? Yeah, and in the sense that like, you know, and statistically speaking, you can kind of like estimate your own like your income or your net worth with like the 5 people you spend the most time with. If you average them together, or
Never heard of that. That's really funny.
Or you know, but the thing is, it's because information diffuses, right? If you know something, probably your friends know a little bit about it, right? I mean, it's like kind of what's happening right now, right?
Keep them in the know.
Yeah, yeah. You like gossip, you gab, or they just like see it happen because they're right near you.
Which is why people should hang out with us.
Yeah, A+.
Yeah.
Bring it back. Bring it back. Yeah. So is this pretty clear to you? Does diffusion seem like intuitive?
Yeah.
Yeah, it does make sense. I'm interested to see how it relates to
Cryptography.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. So cryptography is the science of hiding information, and so it kind of implies that there's an adversary of some sorts, right? There's somebody you're trying to hide it from. You'd like some people to be able to access the information and not others, right? So if we're like all in the Garden of Eden, like best friends forever, and like the lion and the sheep are hanging out, you know, then there's not really a use for cryptography.
Yeah.
So this is actually, in most places, this is considered a weapon, and it was classified as a munition by the United States government for a long time. It was actually the Electronic Freedom Foundation took a lawsuit all the way to the Supreme Court to get it classified as free speech.
Wow.
And people were doing things like taking programs in Perl that implemented a cryptographic algorithm, you know, and then they put them on a T-shirt, and then like, everyone's wearing the T-shirt around. So there's a whole like culture like behind this thing of you know, it's one of the nice things about living in the U.S. is that strong cryptography is totally legal, even if the FBI hates it. But like, let's break down the word, right? Like, crypt actually comes from the Greek kryptos, and which means hidden. But it also like tales from the crypt, right? Like, put your dead people in the crypt, so you kind of like hide death away. You like export that entropy. You don't like poop in your bed, right? You move all the poop into like one place away from where you're eating, right?
Yeah, sure.
So.
This just keeps coming up, like day in and day out, like whether it's watching Jodorowsky or reading Crowley.
Well, it's the base matter, right? So, I mean, turning poop into gold is really reversing the entropic process, which is actually what life is all about.
That's very interesting. Wow.
So yeah, because gold's like really like complex atoms, you know, and then like poop is like mostly carbon, nitrogen, and stuff, phosphorus. A lot simpler atoms. Although I think if you ate gold, you'd probably just poop out gold. So like I don't know if the analogy works that well. So.
You can reconsume it.
You know, it's interesting that you point that out though, because it is like a reverse digestion process that they're like sort of advocating.
Yeah, because I mean, what are you going to buy with that gold? I mean, is it food? Right?
It's like eating with your butt in South Park. Like, not to go there, but like...
Yeah, that's exactly like it. Everything's backwards, man. So we'll talk more about like why would you associate, you know, cryptography with death? And it's sort of like you're trying to kill information. But you know, information isn't really entirely encoded in the string of characters or symbols. It's partly in the minds of people, right? So you're not killing it for everyone, you're killing it for your adversary. So it just looks like noise. And
you're hiding it.
yeah, you're hiding it, exactly.
Secreting it away in the crypt like Juliet.
And there's a lot of layers to this too. I mean, you know, we talked about this more, but there's a aspect of cryptography called steganography, where you want to hide that it is even encrypted, right? Because in a lot of places in the world, encryption is actually illegal.
Right.
and so or you need a license for it. So in China, what this means is that if you're going to encrypt things, you need to give the government the keys so that they can encrypt them or decrypt them. And decrypt meaning read the original text.
Will the process of hiding the encryption work in China? I mean,
well, that's
what. Yeah, that's the idea of steganography. It's like so the I think the most common way of doing it is that you hide a message in an image.
oh.
And so you can do things like you can just change the bits, the least significant bits on each pixel. So you're changing the color of the image just a little bit, but it's not really visible to the naked eye. And however, if you just read off those bits, and interpret it as text, then it ends up being a message.
They say Al-Qaeda communicates with video games and pornography.
Well, that's a similar kind of thing. It might be that they're meeting on like some kind of online forum
And they like
that's
spell
meant for
stuff
something
out.
else.
They spell stuff out like with bullets on walls.
Oh, really?
And like shoot 'em up games.
Oh, I haven't heard of that.
Which apparently, I guess, takes like a lot of dexterity. It's pretty impressive video game play.
Yeah, and they get to practice their shooting at the same time.
Yeah. It's some weird roundabout way. And then the other thing, they said that Bin Laden had like a bunch of pornography that had encrypted like information in it.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. So I mean, it's a common practice, but technically you can hide information in anything.
Yeah.
So I think trying to ban cryptography is ultimately futile, but you can make it difficult for people. So let's keep going. So let's talk about ciphers, because this is actually like a pretty old like science that goes back to Caesar. There's some story about I think one of the Caesars had a secret message he wanted to send, so he shaved the head of one of his servants and wrote it on the guy's skull, the message, and then let him grow his hair back. And then he ran. Right. So then if you can't take away the papers if there are no papers. But a common one that was this is even called sometimes the Caesar shift Caesar cipher. But it's very simple. So basically, that is you kind of number the alphabet, and then you shift everything over by some amount. So this is just an example. You can shift over by 3. But you can shift over by any amount.
All you have to tell the intended person is 3, and they know.
Exactly.
It's shifted by 3.
And so you might have something like so A goes to D, B goes to E, C goes to F, and then when you get back to Z, you wrap around. You wrap around back to the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
And so then to encrypt, you just sort of add +3 to here, right? That doesn't look like English, I don't think. But then to decrypt, to unpack the information, you subtract 3. The thing is, y'all see any problem with this? Like, does it seem like a great cipher to use if you're really trying to hide information?
It's a pretty simple cipher. It's just got one numeral. It's pretty straightforward. There's no exceptions.
Yeah, if you knew that this was encoded with a Caesar cipher, but you didn't know 3, what would you do?
Well, the number of letters is still the same, so it's...
And plus, like there has to be a consonant-vowel relationship.
Yeah.
That's right. So there must how many two-letter words are there?
Right. You can start just deciphering words based on the number of letters.
Or 3-letter words.
The position of the letters.
But there's also there's how many different shift ciphers are there? It's really only 26.
As many as there are letters, yeah.
Yeah, 26. It ends up being 26. So you could actually just try all of them, and then one of them is going to turn out to be English, and probably the other ones are garbage.
And that's what decoder rings basically were, like the serial box ones.
Oh, really?
Yeah, like it was just a shift cipher. Like you'd turn the decoder ring, and then it would have like a fixed ring with the regular alphabet on it.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
Oh, I never had one of those.
Well, yeah, me neither, but like I kind of, I've seen them like in comic books and stuff.
Yeah, I've heard people talking about it, decoder rings. So yeah. So exactly. Right, there's only 26, right? And that's sad. So especially in the age of modern computers, you can check all 26 very quickly, and that's not so good. So here's a more advanced version, and this is actually a building block of more modern ciphers. But the idea is that you have some random permutation of the letters. So A goes to B, but B goes to W or whatever, and maybe you send D to D just to mix things up,
Yeah.
And so as long as you substitute the same letter, always goes to the same letter, right? So the A goes to an I here, M goes to an S, And this is much harder to crack,
Yeah.
right? Because I mean, how many possible substitutions are there? You gonna figure it out?
No.
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 Sounds
So-
like that.
Yeah. And so well.
Well,
Well, it's
I just want to
26.
say, if anybody goes on our Facebook and says "you is iZip," you'll get something for it.
You get a toy cat.
Okay.
So it turns out there's 26 factorial.
26 again. Oh.
So the way you think of that is like, there's 26 options for where to send A. And then for each of those options, there's now 25 options for where you send B. And so then you say 26 times 25 times 24 times 23, all the way down to 1. It ends up being this really big number. Right, so that's great from the point of view of like if you're trying to hide information, this is like you want to make, like this is a repeating thing in cryptography that someone could always guess your password, or someone could guess your key, or someone could just guess your message, right? So you're never like 100% secure from, from an attacker, but you want to make it computationally infeasible. You want to hide your needle in a haystack that's just gigantic. And but there actually is there's another problem with this substitution cipher. Does anyone know what it is?
It's really difficult for the intended to read it.
Well, so well, that's a great point. So you have to
You have to write out the cipher, at some point.
exactly. You have to write that. You have to somehow. Another way to call it is it's the key.
Oh, right.
Right.
Yeah.
The key is like how you in this case lock it and unlock it.
Sure.
And so you have to share that somehow. And that's kind of like a whole other topic is like how do you share keys in like an environment where
Encrypt the,
There's like World War II exploits about like submarines going, I think of who wrote James Bond?
Ian Fleming?
Yeah, I think Ian Fleming during World War II was famous for like going from a boat onto a U-boat, like and stealing like a Nazi key
oh wow.
book or something.
Yeah, I mean the whole story of World War II and like the Enigma machine and how they cracked it is really fascinating, and it's sort of like I think it cemented the power of mathematics in the minds of the populace and the governments. And so to this day, the world's largest employer of mathematicians is the NSA, is the U.S. spy agency.
Wow. That's scary.
Yeah, all the mathematicians, all working on something. Okay, but the thing is, remember we were talking about like distributions, right, and like diffusion, right? So the dead one is uniform, right? Whereas the alive one, the one with signal, the one with information, is not uniform.
Mm-hmm.
Well, so what if we were to just look at characters in English? Some characters are more frequent than others, right?
Yeah.
What do you think is the most frequent one?
E.
Yeah. What do you think is the second most frequent one?
I.
All right, it's a good guess. All right, you want to check next
We
slide?
got that? We got this?
So it turns out it's ETAOI.
Oh, ETAO.
So these are the frequencies.
You're badass.
Yeah, so the thing is, so this is the distribution of just like character frequencies. This isn't looking at words. It doesn't know anything about the meaning of it. It's just looking at these symbols occur with these frequencies. And the thing is, when you do a substitution cipher, you don't change these frequencies at all. You rearrange these things at the bottom, but they still have this curve. And so it's still alive. You haven't really killed the signal. If you had killed the signal, then this would be uniform distribution. And so then it would be like, well, I don't know how to piece together which one goes where.
Yeah, but you really make it into a conference almost.
So that's if you get something that you know is a substitution cipher, you can take the frequencies and then you line them up with known English frequencies, and probably some of them are going to be like wrong, but you'll get the first few right, and then you can kind of fill in the rest by hand.
And this is probably what encryption software does.
Well, yeah. So in modern encryption, these substitution boxes or these substitution ciphers are like a small piece of a larger system. So you'll do it many times, and you'll chain them together. You'll do it on different parts of the message, and then you'll use like previous parts of the message to influence the next part of the message. Because now this is a well understood phenomenon. So you want they call it the diffusion property. You want small changes in your plain text, meaning like the information you're encrypting. You want small changes to result in large changes across the encrypted text. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does.
So yeah. So let's keep going. So let's talk a little bit. So we had shift cipher. That's like very early primitive one, and then second one, the substitution cipher, and then this is a very recent phenomenon. I think this was discovered in the 90s, publicly Diffie and Hellman, and they call it asymmetric key because it involves two keys, and it provides a lot of advantages because there's this issue of how do you securely send, like how do you tell them what the cipher is you're using without then you have to encrypt it, but then what do you encrypt it with? You have to send that key, right? So there's this whole like issue with it. And so the way this works is you have two keys, and one of them is public and one of them is private. Now the keys are numbers in practice, right?
Sure.
But they're called keys because you lock and unlock things with them. But these keys are linked in a certain way. If you lock something with one key, you can only unlock it with the other one. So this asymmetry, or you can also think of it as like a trapdoor function. That it's like by locking it with one of them, you can't unlock it unless you know the secret passage out of the trapdoor. These aren't like reversible functions. So the thing is, you can lock it with either one of them and then unlock it with the other one. And the reason they're called public and private is because public is the one you want to give to everybody. It's sort of like your identity, your cryptographic identity. So it's like, hey, everybody, if you want to talk to me, use my public key. Here's my public key. I'm going to put it on a server. Anyone can download it. I'll put it on Facebook or whatever. Okay. And then the private key you don't tell anybody about because that allows you to unlock things. And it also locks things. So let's go to the next one. So there's two ways you can use this. It kind of corresponds to the asymmetry. If you want to send a secret message, you lock it with someone's public key, right? Everyone has your public key because it's public, right? So I take your public key and I lock the message, and then nobody can unlock it unless they have the private key, and that's only you. So that's what makes it a secret message. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So then the other way around is, how do you know, okay, someone sent you a secret message. How do you know that, okay, somebody signed their name on it? How do you know that's really who sent it?
You need a private key to really know.
Right, so that's the other way around. So that's like there's a digital signature. So if I encrypt it with my private key, and then when you get the message, the encrypted message, you can decrypt it with my public key, you know I must have encrypted it, assuming that no one else has my private key.
Right. Is there an app for that?
Absolutely. This sort of thing is used all over the place in modern software. So like every time you use a web browser,
Like when you log into something, like with your Facebook, or when you log into something.
well, there's sort of. The advantage of this is that you don't have to send your password anywhere. You never have to give your private key to someone. So you think about it in terms of that's one of the so password systems are not really using asymmetric key cryptography, and that's one of the disadvantages. When you think about there's some countries in the world where you can't really use your credit card.
Yeah.
Because you think about the number on the credit card is your secret key, right? It's the thing that allows them to take money out of your account. It's like if you were to just pull your wallet out and hand your whole wallet to the clerk, and you just hope they don't pull out too much money, right? But we have a lot of trust and a lot of built-up infrastructure for detecting fraud and stuff in this country. So it's we can use those systems, but in a lot of places you don't want to use your credit card. And so that's another kind of tangent, but that's one of the advantages of Bitcoin. Bitcoin uses asymmetric key cryptography, so you never have to expose your credit card number.
But you can use it
Anywhere that someone accepts it, at least.
Yeah, that's right.
Not that many places yet.
True.
But yeah, but whenever you go to a website and you have HTTPS, or you'll get the little green bar you go to your bank's website.
Yeah.
Right. But that's using both of these aspects. So you get a certificate from the server, which is actually it's a public key, and it says, hey, if you want to talk to the server securely, if you want to send a secret message to the server, here's the key you got to encrypt it with. The the thing is, how do you know that's really the key? Well, that key was signed by some other key. and there's like a whole chain of attribution that goes back to a root certificate, which is, yeah. So it all depends on this like central point of failure. So it's like not the best system in the world, but maybe the best one we've got for now. But yeah, so the signature. So these are like two like this is how do I make sure only you hear me, and then this is how do you know that you're hearing from me.
Yeah.
And it's the same function as like a signature on like a check, right? So really, when you send messages, like when you connect the HTTPS, there's two layers of encryption. One is the secret message layer using their public key, and the other one is using your private key. And so you just have a convention. You say, I always do this one first, and then they know to decrypt it with your public key, and then they're decrypt it with their private key. But yeah, treasure information, right?
Yeah.
Food, gold. Yeah. So anyway, this is just like some vocabulary. If you run any of these things, so you can like. So these guys, Ravesh, Shamir, Edelman, they RSA. So they're a company now, and then actually this is public key cryptography. They're in the news after Snowden because he revealed that they were weakening their crypto for the government, and so yeah, scandals. Because the thing is, if you weaken it for some people, you weaken it for everyone.
Yeah,
and it's kind of a difficult thing to part, because it's like
It's like China.
Yeah. I mean, in some sense, it is. The thing is, there are secure ciphers, but they try to put either backdoors or weaken the crypto in some way. So there's a lot of what these mathematicians are doing is looking for like tiny holes in the math. So if you use certain parameters with this algorithm, then actually we know how to break it faster. But you can always use different parameters if that they didn't recommend.
Yeah.
So it's like, and the elliptic curve. This one's really interesting. This is the one Bitcoin uses, and this is a very recent thing. But basically you have these like points on a curve, and then you form this way of to encrypt. You kind of you encode your message as a point on the curve, and then you bounce around on this curve over and over until you just end up at some random other place on the curve. And the curve is actually put on a donut, so the curve wraps around on itself. It's really cool.
Wow.
But the
is that what you would say is the most effective of those methods?
Data platelets.
Yeah, it kind of is. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a cool association. It depends on how you measure it, because there's you can have different key sizes. So you can say oh, I'm gonna only use 256 bits with this one versus I'm gonna use 4096 bits with this one.
Okay.
And it's sort of but yeah, so this is modern browsers are using this for some of their stuff. Yeah, I think to understand, I think there's this a lot of people ask, okay, yeah, but why does crypto matter? If you have nothing to hide, then you have nothing to fear, right? That's what the Stasi said. And the thing is, it is one of these things where there's a feeling of secrets are no fun unless they are for everyone. And there's a kind of an implied war component or an adversarial component when you're using cryptography that I think makes some people uncomfortable, and especially if they feel like it's not immediately useful. But I think information asymmetry can have a lot of consequences. If you have say one group of people that knows everything about everyone else, but nobody knows anything about them, well, it's you can never prosecute someone if you don't know what they're doing.
A lot of long-term hidden effects. You never know what they're going to do with that information.
Yeah, and it's a huge advantage. And also, so there's an aspect that I think that most people aren't it's not in the forefront of people's minds, but it's social engineering. So if someone knows a lot about you because let's say they're not your friend, but somehow they have access to your Facebook, and then they can see who you're friends with, what places you go, who you like, what kinds of things you like, what kinds of comments you like, or the kinds of things you say, how you talk, what products you buy. then they can use that information to craft a personality that will very likely be accepted by you as a friend.
Ooh.
And so then they can use this to like infiltrate social groups, and so then it's sort of like, you know, it's like a not very fun feeling when you find out someone's been your friend for a long time and actually they were just like pretending to like all those things. And so that sort of thing is like, yeah, and so that's something to think about. And you know, and the thing is, like, we have these like vast telecommunication networks, and they're really amazing. It's amazing that all these pieces work so well, you know. But it's sort of, you know, so anyway, there's these questions that you can ask about technology that can kind of like, you know, give you a framework for trying to understand like what kinds of risks are associated with using that technology. And so first one is like, is it encrypted in transit, right? As the message is being sent to the receiver, like who's in the middle? You know, it's like if I'm talking to my friend at a coffee shop, people at the adjacent table can hear what I'm saying.
Sure.
But then that's a whole separate situation from, you know, can the network provider actually read it? So it's like, so maybe when I send my emails, you know, Google, like nobody between me and Google can read the email, but then can Google itself read the emails? Well, they do. And they try to make it so that only bots can do it, and like a few people. But yeah, so that's another thing. So it's like, because are you implicitly trusting whoever provided you with the technology? So for example, like Skype, right? Skype is encrypted in transit, but Skype can read it, Microsoft can read it, and they'll share that information with whoever you know, has a lot of money and guns.
Yeah.
And so then there's another aspect. How do you know you're talking to the right person? This is the authentication or like digital signature thing. So in something like voice calls or video chats, it's pretty easy, right? I mean, like somebody would have to like dress up and like fake a voice in order to fake that. But if it's text, you know, you don't really know.
Yeah, you don't know. You never know who's on the other end, even if it's the right phone.
Yeah, exactly. Because it took a bunch of hops to get from their phone to your phone. And so then there's also this notion of forward secrecy. So it's sort of like if someone was collecting all the encrypted messages, you know, they can't read them, but then later they find your keys, can they go back and read all of your messages? And you might think that, of course, right, that's what the key, but there's schemes you can use that have forward secrecy so that unless you catch it right then, you can't read it.
Does that mean that it can't be stored at all, or that?
It can be stored, but getting keys later doesn't help you for the stuff you stored before.
I see.
So it's sort of like just storing a bunch of garbage or like random bytes.
Okay.
Speaking of random bytes or garbage, yeah. So these things of I forgot to say with the public asymmetric key cryptography, it does have this like annihilation of the signal, right? So it diffuses the instead of it having this nice frequency distribution, everything levels out. So maybe I did say that, but so yeah. So another question to ask is it open source? And what that means is that can anyone read the source code? So there's like these websites where people put up, you know, they're working on a project that it's a software project or a hardware project or even other things, and then they upload to the site where anybody can look at it, anybody can download it and run it themselves. And so, for example, like the Linux operating system is open source, but Windows is not.
Yeah.
And the reason, and this is an important aspect of trust because one, it allows people to, even if you aren't personally reading the source code, it means that anybody could have. So it raises the bar for like trying to slip in a backdoor or some kind of you know, weakening of the software.
Or malware, bot, whatever.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
Development stage.
And it still can happen, but it's something, it becomes a lot harder, especially if you have a lot of people working on these projects, because then every time you make a change to the code, everyone can look at it, and it's like it can be very obvious if you're inserting like, you know, holes, you know. So and open design is a similar idea, you know, sort of like, but it's kind of a higher level thing, and that, you know, you have description of like, you know, how are these keys getting used, how do they get transmitted, what's the key length, you know, and all these things. So it's something where you could send this document to professional cryptographers and have them review it and say, okay, this is not a problem or this is a problem. Because the thing is, cryptography is complicated and hard, and so nobody's so good at it that they can like really do it by themselves and have it more secure than if everyone was looking at it. And so that's another aspect of this independent code audit. So this is something you can, a lot of like people who make supposedly secure software will hire external consultants who are expert cryptographers.
Houdini style.
Yeah, yes. Did Houdini do that?
He used to do that with locks. Like, I think, like in prisons, I think they used to lock them in jail cells, and he would like break out of the jail cells because he had like a little portable method of copying keys or making keys. He had some sort of little locksmithing.
Interesting.
Talent. But like, you know, like the trope of the vault maker hired a thief or something like that to try to break into it. Or
yeah, it's very much like that. And in fact, like, you know, this is kind of focusing on cryptography, but there's like the whole like larger field of information security. You think of cryptography as like the lock on the door, and usually the cryptography is actually the strongest part of like the whole system. There's, you know, it's not that they're not going to break the lock. They're probably going to like kick through the door, or they'll like climb in through the